Today is September 5th, 2011, Labor Day. We are at the home of George A. Schwarz, a veteran of the Second World War. George, age 90, lives in Sterling Heights, Michigan, with his wife Mary, who is 89. George, thank you for talking with us this morning.
You're welcome.
So, where were you born?
Detroit, Michigan,
And your date of birth?
7/3/21.
Which branch of the military were you in?
I didn't hear you.
Which branch of the military were you in?
I was in the infantry army.
And were you drafted or did you enlist?
Drafted
Okay. And where were you living at the time?
in Detroit.
Okay. And when you joined the army, what was your rank going in?
When I joined the army, I was put in the. When I was drafted, I was put in the army. Went to Fort Custer. From Fort Custer, I went to Fort Lewis, Washington, by train. A whole bunch of us. We traveled by train, and we would. It took about 3 days to get there, if I remember correctly. We would stop in the morning someplace after breakfast, and they'd take us out of the train, and we would have to run around the whole train, which had about 6 or 7 cars, and plus the engine. In some places, they had to put 3 engines on to get us through the high mountains of someplace. I forgot where it was. Maybe it was Washington or someplace before we got there. When we landed in Seattle, they had Army trucks come and took us to Fort Lewis, Washington. That's where I did my training.
And how long was your basic training?
My basic training was about 4 months, if I remember correctly.
Can you tell me a little bit about your training experiences? Was it
Well,
tough?
our basic training, besides all our calisthenics and stuff like that, we had to go out into the shoot a rifle, M1 rifle. In them days, it was just an M1 rifle, and qualify for that. And then we had to go and practice on a machine gun. We had take it apart, put it together, and make sure everything, and make sure it works. That was in case something happened. We carry a little extra tools. The spring would have broke. We had to put it in, and then we took it to the range and see how good we could fire it. By firing it, we had to pull the trigger where it was just they made you just do 3 shots. They didn't want you to hold on to the trigger or the whole belt would go through. 3 shots, and then sometimes 5. Usually every 4th shot, it was a bullet come out. What did they used to call it? It would light up, and that was, and plus your basic training, and
Okay.
then
Do
from
you
there
go
we
ahead.
went by down to Cleveland, California, and we were there for 2 days, and then we had to clean everything, put it in boxes, and on the 3rd day we were put on a ship to go to Hawaii.
Okay.
We
So
landed in Hilo.
you served in the Pacific Theater.
Yep.
So you left for Hawaii. What did you do when you got to Hawaii? What did you do when you got to Hawaii?
Hawaii, we just did our basic training again, and we were there for, if I remember correctly, about 2 months. And our calisthenics and keep us in shape. And then we got on another boat and went to an island called Morotai. And from Morotai, we just checked the island over. And from there, we went to Luzon. I got on another ship and went to Luzon. There it was 7 days after MacArthur landed there, a second time, you know, and we unloaded ships for 2 days, and then we were told to look up at, and there it was. He said, up in that big high mountain is called Baguio. That's where MacArthur had his West Point. He had a training up there. And he said we had to capture that. So on the way up, we took a little fighting. Took about, if I remember correctly, it took about 7 days to get to the top of it. A lot of marching and some fighting.
Okay. How big was your unit?
Our unit was 130th Infantry. How many men you mean? Company. I was in Company D, which had 204 men, counting the officers. 204.
Okay. And you were in the gunnery area, so you carried a rifle.
Well, we would switch off. In our unit there was 10 people, and we would switch off. Some would carry the tripod, which weighed 53 pounds. The gun weighed 53 pounds with water in it, and we would, and people that would carry that would, the rest of the people would carry rifles, or M1 rifles, and if we had to start fighting, well, then the people that were carrying the gun and the tripod, they would get up and put the gun together in the tripod, and then they would start, and then other fellows would carry their bullets up in their boxes, the belts of bullets, 250 rounds in a belt, and they would feed it to the man that was next to the feeder and put it through.
Okay.
And the rest of the fellows the rest of the men would be with their rifles in case we needed them.
Okay.
We were always attached to C Company or B Company. D Company wasn't alone. We were attached to the rifle companies also, and the mortars.
Okay. And so there were about 130 in your group. You said you did see combat.
Yep.
Were there any casualties in your group?
Oh yes, we had casualties. We had a lot of casualties.
Yeah.
Some that didn't make it at all.
And were you ever a prisoner of war during that time?
No, never a prisoner.
Okay. Can you tell us maybe a few of your most memorable experiences during that time of combat?
Happy?
Happier or
well,
otherwise?
uh, I got I got banged up a couple of times. I got two Purple Hearts. Well, you get one Purple Heart, then if you get hurt again, you get a cluster. You only get one Purple Heart. You know.
And how did you earn that Purple Heart?
Pardon?
How did you earn the Purple Heart?
I got shot in the wrong place. And then the second one, I got um, uh, a mortar landed by me, and all the shrapnel. I got a lot of shrapnel in me.
And do you have any pain or scars from that even today?
Oh yes, I have scars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got one right here.
And so, while you were in the service, did you stay in touch with your family?
Just by, I guess they call them in them days. They didn't call it email. They call what was them?
Telegrams or?
No, just writing a letter.
Yeah.
Small letter, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And did you know your future wife Mary at the time? Or
Did I what?
Did you know your future wife Mary at the time that you were in?
No, I got a letter one day in the mail, and I never said, well, I don't know this person. Now, talking to myself, I didn't know this person because I looked at the return address, and I opened it up, though. It was my name and my Social Security number. I'm not in Social Security, my Army number. And then so she said how she got my name through a friend of mine that she worked with. And so we start corresponding.
Okay. And okay, during your tour of duty, what was the food like?
What was what?
What was the food like? The food.
Oh, the food? Oh, well, 50-50. If you're fighting for a few days and then all of a sudden you can't get no food because they can't drop it to you because the wind is so strong, it would blow into the Japs' lines. So you get kind of hungry. So when you come back, you eat anything they would give you.
Is there something special that you did for like good luck before you went out on a mission, or any kind of ritual or anything?
No,
No.
I can't think of it.
Okay.
I have a lot of good friends.
Yeah. When you had some downtime, how did people entertain themselves?
Well, when we were pulled back to a rest area, they sometimes had some entertainment for us, and we would go and watch that, just sit down and write and rest, and to the next mission.
Do you recall any particular humorous event or something funny or unusual that happened?
Can't think of anything right now.
I think you mentioned once about tanks. You were marching alongside tanks.
What?
You were marching alongside some tanks at one point.
Oh yes. Well, one time in a town of Erringay. It's pronounced two ways, Erringay or Ringay. We were put on this road one night, right at the corner of one road, where another highway comes up from, and that takes you to the main road going up to Baguio. And so this one evening we were dug in by the gun. This tank driver told us, he says, I want you to lay flat, and he says, you're going to be raised up off the ground a little bit. And when you come back down, you bite the dust if you had to, because he says, we know, we can see there's about 500 Japs coming up. And he said, we're going to put a canister on our gun. That's in a tank gun now. I don't know nothing about tanks too much. And he says, it'll raise you, because you're laying right next to us, and it will raise you. And when he let that gun go 2 or 3 times, it did raise the whole body right up off the ground. And he was right. Bite the dust when you get downward. He says, we don't want you to lose any teeth. So the next morning, what happened during the night, and we did a lot of, she told us to do some firing over there. And so the next morning we got up, we were told to go down and look. And there was 200 or 300 Japs laying there all dead. Then we had to go, and it took us to, and the rifle companies go to these homes that was spread out in the little village there and go make sure there was no Japs in these houses, you know. So that's.
Okay. So do you remember how long you spent over there in the service?
Overseas?
Yeah.
I spent a good 2.5 years overseas. Never had a furlough.
Really?
Never had we were all set to go. Some of us were all set to go. Next in line, I was one of them, with my good friend A.J. Martin, which is a personal friend of mine, was in the service there. Then we were called off. We couldn't go. But we never had a furlough. I could say our company never had a furlough.
Did you, while you were there, did you contract any type of illness?
Any what?
Any illness?
No. We got enough shots, and they would give us.
Did you have malaria?
They would. We took these Ativan pills that would. It was for malaria and stuff, right? We got shots.
Okay.
But when I came home, and I was home about 2 days, I got a little touch of malaria once, just a little touch. The only time I ever had it. Made me kind of sick. And I had to go and get I had to get checked out and get some medicine, and it cleared it up. Made me sick for a couple of days.
So when you did come back home, what did you do in the days and weeks following your return?
Well, I came back home, it was in December. If I remember right, it was around December the 5th or something like that. And I worked for the J.L. Hudson Company at that time, but I didn't want to go back right then and there because it was the Christmas rush, and I didn't feel like going back into that hard rush. So I went down, visit there, and told them I'd be back in January. They were willing to take me back.
And after you came back, that's when you met Mary?
That I did, yes.
Okay. And then when you came back, did you correspond or continue any of your friendships with your...
Yes, my good friend, which A.J. Martin, he was from, he lived around where the Packard Motor Car Company was, over in East Grand Boulevard. We made good friends in the service there. He was my closest friend and best buddy, and we made good friends with him, and he worked for Chrysler's, And then he retired and moved. The last time I heard from him, he passed away, but he moved out in around Ann Arbor someplace on a lake. He loved to fish, and that was his big hobby. And then I met one night. I was coming with my package truck from Hudson's, worked for Hudson's, and all of a sudden I caught a light, and this policeman was directing traffic, and he looked over, and he was a tall fellow, and he says, "Hey, George Schwarz." And I looked at him, so when we got the green light, I pulled over to one side, and he come over and talked to me. He worked for, and he was one of our friends too in the service. I didn't know he was a policeman, but we tried him. And then one other time, I got a call from a fellow that lived in Chesterfield Township. At that time, I didn't even know where Chesterfield Township was. And he got together with the four of us and our wives, and we went out to dinner one night, and was happy to see the other three fellows too. And we had a good evening, spent a lot of, and we got, but I understand they're all passed away now.
So you came home. Did you join a veterans organization?
No, I didn't. I should tell you about one other fellow too. I don't talk too much about religion, but this one fellow was a second cook in our outfit. His name was Nelson Eddy, and we were real close too. And you get so when you're in the service and you're not religious, you want to be. It makes you religious, I should say. Then you think about God and stuff like that after especially you get hurt one time. So I just happened that I joined this Catholic religion through him. He was my godfather. He lives in New York. He lived in Staten Island. He was a fireman for 30 years. He owned his own business also. He owned vinyl siding and windows. And I understand his sons now took over the business. And I just heard about a year ago that he passed away. His son wrote and told me. But we did keep in contact on phone or letters. So you meet a lot of good men. You meet a lot of good men. And then from Luzon, I went. You want to know? I'm getting ahead of the story where he asked me. We had to go to Japan. I was only in Japan for at the most of 1 month. Then we came home.
Is that where most of the fighting took place?
No fighting in Japan, just police work.
Okay. And then you also joined the Elks when you came home?
I joined the fraternal Elks. Fraternal organization, a friend of mine that belonged to it, he took us out one night to his lodge, and my wife kind of liked what we were seeing, and we joined that, and I've had a very good time. I got interested in it. I went through the chairs. There's 4 chairs you have to go through before you're exalted ruler, and I went through that. And I also was the vice president of our district, and also the district deputy grand exalted ruler of our district. which at that time had 10 lodges in it, so you were in charge of the 10 lodges when you're vice president and the district deputy. And made a lot of good friends through the Elks, but most of them right now, they have passed away. Ones that I went through the chairs with and everything, they're all passed away. But I still belong to it.
And the Elks organization does a lot for veterans.
They do. The Elks, they built and after World War I, they built a 250-room hospital in Boston. They built the hospital, they furnished the hospital, and that's when veterans are coming home. There was no such. That was the first veterans hospital. It's in Boston. I understand it's now a 700-bed hospital, and I was told, and so I got interested in the veterans through the Elks, and I did a lot for the veterans for 25 years. I was the veteran chairman of my lodge. They never had a veteran chairman, so I started that in my lodge. And then I went on, and one night I was watching a program on television where they would have young children come and visit older people in the hospital. And when I say young children, I want to say around 12, 14 years old, and they used to go to the hospital and got interested with the senior citizens and the nursing homes and stuff like that. And it gave me an idea. Why can't we do this for our veterans in our hospital? So I started that program in Michigan, and then I went on to Ohio and Indiana, and finally the Grand Lodge took it on for the whole United States. And they made me the chairman of that. So I was in charge for over 20 years of doing not only my 7 hospitals in the state of Michigan. I would take care of them. The Grand Lodge, it goes back to say how I used to get a check from them every month, and I have 7 hospital chairmen, and I've given them so much money every month to run their hospital, to put on some program to entertain the veterans at their hospital. And I had to take care of that. That was my job for the state of Michigan. And then went on to adopt some veterans, which we do. I still do. I still write a card, a birthday card, Christmas cards to the one down there, and send the 2 that my wife and I have adopted. We send them socks and some little gift they want, for Christmas. So, so after 20-some years, I had to give up the Grand Lodge, taking care of the United States. I didn't take care of their house. All I did is take care of their chairman for the Adoptive Veteran Program, keep in contact with the 50 chairmen. And but I gave this all up because of sickness and my family and stuff like that.
So looking back on your career in the Army and your experience in World War II, what do you think about the country, the U.S., where it's headed today? Right now we're in the wars with in Afghanistan and Iraq. What do you think about that?
Well, it's hard after you ask me a question that, it's kind of, I hate to get into politics, but I don't think we should be over there. I really don't. We're losing too many people, young soldiers. I just think we should be pulled out of there. And my opinion is we shouldn't be there.
Well, this concludes our interview with George A. Schwarz, a military veteran of World War II. George, thank you again for speaking with us today.
And I thank you for interviewing me. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for your service to the United States of America.
You're welcome.